Welcome back to Chat Roulette. It's episode 2. I'm here with Xab, Zabarabbaroo, if you will, and we're here to talk about training and have a little bit of a chat and a yap. How are you doing today, Xab?
I am doing pretty well, bud. How are you?
I'm doing all right. I've already been complaining to you about my tiredness. It's in England, time's just gone forward an hour. British summertime has started, so I'm a little bit tired.
Everyone's calendars across the world have been screwed over by the fact that their British counterparts are,
Yeah.
yeah, all over the place.
Everyone's affected. Do most places change their hours?
I don't know. I do think it's a British thing, but
Such a
yeah,
stupid British thing. I don't like it. But I mean,
completely
if
been
you're
an
English,
exploit
you
to
just
everybody.
complain about England, right?
Yeah, I
So,
mean, you'll complain if they didn't change it as well. Like, everyone would be like,
I
oh,
mean,
why is it?
why don't they change it? They do it everywhere else. That's what I'd be like.
I'm intrigued by this. I can only see kind of half the titles on this board, but I'm
Oh,
excited.
well, I'll give it a spin. There's some from you last week. There's a couple I thought I'd put in there because I think you'd have some good takes. So let's see what happens. Oh, there we go. I couldn't get that spinning. I clicked that a few times. Right, what have we got? Oh, I'm
Are
excited for
length and
this one.
partials actually better for
Here we
hypertrophy?
go. Are they? And I know you did a post on hypertrophy recently, which is what made me want to chuck this in there because I think you've just done some pretty good research. So let me close this down and let's get chatting.
Right.
I mean, should we define a lengthened partial first?
Yeah, do you want to demo it? Do you want to demo a length and partial?
Do you know what? I don't. I don't actually know if I know what a lengthened partial is. My
Right.
understanding of a lengthened partial is you're going to lengthen the muscle and you're going to do partial reps. So if I take my arm overhead and I stretch it, I'm lengthened, and then I just do that.
Yeah. So because well, it's the whole thing of you've got full range of motion, so you go through full elbow extension, like at any angle. But if you bring your hand overhead, obviously you're lengthening the part of the tricep that crosses over the shoulder joint. So that's
Yeah.
getting stretched to a greater extent, which potentially could mean that there's going to be an additional benefit to that end range of motion. But the kind of theory, do you want to go? So, do you want to go into
I
sarcomere
knew this was going to
genesis?
set you off.
It's a really balanced conversation. Like in the grand scheme of things, it's a really balanced conversation, right? So, if you take yourself to full range of motion, if you take yourself into a lengthened position, you're going to stimulate the development of new sarcomeres. So you've got like these units within your muscle fiber that are stacked in sequence, and each of them is a contractile unit, right? If you stretch the muscle, you're going to cause yourself to add additional units to make sure that you can reach into that new range of motion. So by going into a lengthened position and loading yourself in a lengthened position, you're going to stimulate greater levels of sarcomerogenesis,
I
which
can see that.
is kind of linked to hypertrophy. So the theory was, okay, right, well, if you do that and you load it, so you expose yourself to a decent amount of mechanical tension, you're going to increase the hypertrophy response to that form of lift. So you could move your elbow overhead. You could just do the bottom portion of elbow extension, or particularly emphasize loading that portion of the lift. And as a result, you might see bigger hypertrophy gains.
Interesting.
Flip side.
Oh, I've got a lot to argue with this as well. I think that's
Okay.
so dumb.
So the flip side is like in a lengthened position, if you look at like the force curve of a muscle, like a muscle is strongest in its middle range of motion. So the amount of actual tension you can create internally within a muscle is always going to be highest in the bit in that center range, because of the fact if you look at how the sliding filament theory of muscle contraction works, you've got like each of those sarcomeres. Let's go back to a sarcomere, is made up of like a thick filament running down the middle that pulls two thin filaments over itself. At the end range, there's not very much crossover between the thick filament and the thin filament. So there's not a huge capacity to create force.
Yeah.
As you move closer, there's more overlap. So there's more potential binding points between that thick filament and the thin filaments. And as a result, you can create more force. And then as you get towards the end range, so as you shorten completely, you end up in a position where there's overlap and that interferes with force production. So if you focus on stimulating mechanical tension in the end range of motion, you're going to limit the amount of actual force output you can produce because you're going to be targeting yourself where you're weak. So that when you get to the point where you're actually strong, you're not exposing yourself to the maximum amount of force that you could lift in that position. So like that's why like there's been like cam machines for years, right? You look at like the Medex stuff, you look at the Nautilus equipment that is designed to kind of match the strength curve of a muscle over the course of a rep. It exposes you to the amount of force that you are capable of lifting at all points in that movement. So like you were already basically targeting yourself in the lengthened position to the maximum capacity you could, moving through into your stronger portion. Because of the way the like belt wrapped around this cam, it would change the force requirement to overcome the weight, and as such, you would challenge yourself in that position as well. And then as you got to the end range, it would get easier again, and again you'd still be challenging yourself to them. So you'd be in a position where like you're constantly taxing the muscle as much as you possibly can. So yeah. The flip side of the initial argument is, okay, yeah, you're not targeting, like you might get an additional benefit in terms of sarcomerigenesis if you target the lengthened position. But if you're then not exposing yourself enough load in the stronger position, you're not going to develop the hypertrophy that you could potentially see by loading that portion of the lift a little bit more as well. So yeah.
I completely agree with everything you just said, and I think that's it's a really fair argument for why it works. I think the argument, and I'm sure you kind of think, is fundamentally flawed. I think what you said initially is like you can just use like a varied intensity machine. You can chuck bands onto something. You can use chains.
Yeah.
And I mean, fundamentally, you're always going to train the lengthened position if you just take your muscle through full range. And like even something as simple as a dumbbell curl, if you think about a dumbbell curl down by your sides, if you just sit on an incline bench, it lengthens your arms out a little bit. As you lift the dumbbell up and your like forearm gets perpendicular to the floor, you're going to have maximum force because of gravity. So it gets harder in the middle, a little bit easier at the bottom. So you can train that lengthened position and get the benefit just by training full range. But to be honest, the thing I always come back to is like the basic driver of hypertrophy is just total mechanical tension. And there are things that vary it, like going through more range, we know helps improve hypertrophy. You can have metabolic stimulus. You can, I don't know, do steroids and eat more. But fundamentally, all that you need to do is take the muscle through range, take it near to mechanical failure through like just accumulated. Well, no, that's not through accumulated stress. Just take it near to failure and accumulate a lot of that over time through volume. And, you know, you can do a lot of volume at slightly lower intensity. You can do higher intensity. But all the lengthened partial argument does for me is essentially say, if you were to do hypertrophy really, really well and perfectly, and then add this on top, you would get more gains. But if you're doing hypertrophy really, really well, you're probably already training to the point where adding just lengthened partials would either take away from the amount of volume you need or just mean you're doing less mechanical tension in general. And I think most people just train harder and get the same results.
I think you're probably right with the vast majority. So one of the things that's interesting is like the stuff that shows that there's a benefit to lengthened partials typically comes when you look at research in inexperienced lifters who don't necessarily have that range, don't necessarily move through that range that much. So they're going to see a bigger increase in hypertrophy responses as a result of developing new sarcomeres because of the fact they've not been used to moving into that range of motion. If you get someone who is used to moving into that range of motion, exposing them to that same range of motion again isn't going to promote greater levels of sarcomerogenesis. So then at that point, you are just limiting the amount of mechanical tension that you're exposing the person to because of the fact they're weaker in that position regardless. And all the studies the studies that have come out recently, the other ones that look at kind of more advanced lifters, the review articles that are looking into the impact of using lengthened partials are saying there's a negative effect of using lengthened partials versus full range of motion, or there's no additional benefit of using lengthened partials versus full range of motion in people that are experienced trainers. The only caveat I'd add is like, it's kind of like, anything that you do should be about exposing yourself to novelty, right? If you think about progressive overload, you can like progress in any direction. So it might be that if you have someone who's been doing a shorter range of motion for a long period, if someone's been doing like box squats for a while because of the fact they've been doing some explosive training, and then you go, okay, right, well now we're going to take you into a lengthened position. That is going to be a novel stimulus to them because they've not been exposed to it for a while, so they're going to see additional benefits to it. So even if you've got an advanced lifter, if they've not been going through full range of motion for a period of time, because of the fact you've been focusing more on peak contraction force in end range for sprinting, punching, jumping, etc. Then taking them through a period where they are going through full range, or they are doing the lengthened portion of the lift and primarily targeting the lengthened portion of the lift, they're going to see an additional benefit from that because of the fact they've not seen it before. They've not seen it for a while. So that's
I
it.
will argue. What are the odds of having an athlete who isn't going through full range at least semi-regularly? Like, there's some. If you're a sprinter, like I know plenty of sprinters who just never do full depth squats and stuff.
Yeah.
Probably just should be doing it more regular. Like if you're avoiding that range for so long that you actually reduce the amount of like muscle you have, you probably should have entered that range sooner.
So you probably wouldn't necessarily reduce the amount of muscle you have. You just wouldn't have stimulated that particular portion of the lift for a while. So like, and it's the whole thing of like GPP versus SPP, right? So everyone's talking about general preparatory phases at the moment versus specific preparatory phases. And for most people, you don't need to worry about specific preparatory phase unless you are an athlete who has very, very specific needs. So if you have someone who is a sprinter, a jumper, like a thrower, they only really need to maximize strength output in a very, very specific range of motion. And taking them into a deeper range of motion where they're going to be weaker and less capable of producing force is going to attenuate the stimulus that you're giving them that's specific to their particular sport. So like if I've got someone who jumps and they never bend their knees below like 20 degrees, 30 degrees, me taking them to 90 degrees in a squat means that the amount of weight they're having to overcome is going to be lower. The amount of force they're able to generate in that position is going to be lower than they would be from like a mid-thigh pull type position or a... Yeah. So they're not getting the maximum force benefit of like the training session. They're not getting the maximum strength benefit of the training session they could have got if I'd done a more specific movement. So if I've got someone going into a competitive season and it's like, okay, right, you've got 8 weeks to properly prepare for your jump season. And then you're going to have a couple of months where you're in competition and in a competitive cycle. That's like 16 weeks where they're not necessarily going to see full range.
Point. I would challenge though. I find it hard to believe you would have an athlete who you don't get them going through a decent amount of range. Because whilst it's not useful necessarily for the full strength benefit, which I completely agree with, like we do know we want to be going through full range to keep the joints healthy. We know we want to be like getting nice stretches through the tendons, through the connective tissue. And I think you'd always have some element of full range work in there.
Yeah,
right?
but then let's flip that. What's the difference between a stimulating load and a maintaining load? So like if I'm just going into a position where I've got someone going through a maintaining load in that range of motion to maintain joint health, maintain physical attributes that are associated with performance, but then the stimulating load I'm applying is only in the shortened range. Then when I then go back to doing a stimulate, it's all about like how that load changes over time, right? So if I'm loading that particular system in that particular, I get that you want to be controversial, and I appreciate that, Sam, and it's wonderful because, in all fairness, you are kind of right. Like for most people as well, it's like
no one needs it. I don't think there's a single athlete in the world who's ever lost a competition because they fucking weren't doing lengthened partials. It doesn't. Find me one.
All right, LeBron James never does anything in a lengthened position. Just watch one of LeBron James's sessions. The man has never actually bent his knee. Like
lengthened partial's pointless if you're LeBron because it's unnecessary.
Yeah,
and he's still pretty jacked.
I mean, he is like just the most ludicrous genetic freak. It's wonderful to watch. I'm not even slightly jealous.
I can't even be jealous. I'm too far away from his body type. Like I just ignore that people that big exist. I'm like, nah, not real.
The thing is, like him bending his knees to 30 degrees is basically equivalent to most human beings like going into full depth. Like look at like Victor Wembanyama. Victor Wembanyama is like 7'8". He's not, but like he's just fucking stupidly
Some
big.
people are massive though.
Yeah.
Do you know what? I've got a 7-foot uncle, and when I stand next to him, I'm like, how are you real? Like I look at him and I'm like, what are you? Like we're not the same species, surely.
I've got two friends in Spain called Pablo and David that both used to play like quite high level basketball out in Spain. Yeah. Like David's just retired. He's just had his shirt retired for Granada, and he is. But like both of them make me feel like a child when I give them a hug. Like
you're massive as well.
I feel like a relatively tall person in day-to-day life, and then I go give these guys a hug, and I'm like, hey, Dad.
You know what it's like to be like the rest of us now. Like that's how you make everyone else feel.
you know what? Part of me really likes it.
Yeah,
It's,
you know, I
it's fine, so
would
safe.
love it. I'd love being giant. I like being small, but I think being big must be pretty fun. Although I did have a dog jump up the other day, and it was eye to eye. You'll never experience what it's like to eye with a dog.
I don't know. My friend had a Great Dane, and it was pretty
That is
big.
pretty big.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Like sat down, and next thing you know, this thing's just like head on your shoulder, and like
They're
gone.
massive, aren't they?
Great Danes are just they're just unnecessarily
Pretty
big.
great.
They're pretty cool. Yeah. Ha. Oh
Yeah,
god.
you like that? You like that?
Yeah, that hit me a bit late. Sorry for not getting that instantly.
It's all right. I was just trying my best. But
No, I appreciate it. It
to
was lovely.
circle back to something you said earlier, it was really interesting that you pointed out that a lot of the studies that show the benefits of lengthened partials have been done on beginners
Yep.
versus advanced athletes, and that's actually a problem I think across the board in sports science. Is a lot of people and a lot of influencers will take studies done on non-trainees essentially who can kind of progress doing like literally anything.
Yeah.
Like,
I mean,
you could build muscle
there's a
picking
benefit
up
to that
fucking
as well,
plant
though, right?
pots.
Like, it's one of those things where you kind of want to be able to see a quick response. So the idea of using newbie gains is beneficial, because if you're looking at a study where you've got someone for 8 weeks, maybe 12 weeks, you're not going to get them following a program for much longer than that for a study,
Yeah.
because they'll have drinking to do at university. But
Well, they
like,
are all 18, aren't they? The people
exactly,
they
but that's
use.
it. It's because whenever you do a research study at university, you're there like, right, I need to get as many participants as possible from as wide a range as possible. Put it out on the notice board. The only people that are applying to take part in university studies are university students,
Yeah,
because
and
they
you've got
need
to give them
points
like
for credit.
20 quid to make them turn up as well.
Or you've got to get like, so our university had it so that you had to participate in like, I think it was like 3 studies a year
Really?
in order to, as part of your degree to get credits. Because
Wow.
because they needed participants for the later.
I suppose
later
it's good
so
as well.
it
Like,
makes
it's
sense,
actually
right?
good to be part of a study to see how it works from the like participant perspective.
The issue is I was always like slightly late in terms of applying for the studies, so it always meant that I ended up with the ones where you had pinpricks. So like you'd do like a VO2 max test on like a Wingate machine, and you'd be like riding along, and then someone would go, "Oh, can I just take a blood test?" And they'd just like stab you in the finger, draw some blood, and be like,
And then
"Cool,
like, come on, crack on, get running.
keep going." It was trying to write any essays, trying to type up essays after that, and your fingers were just like in agony.
Ooh, yeah, that doesn't sound fun.
yeah.
That doesn't sound like a good time. I can see that benefit though, and it's a really fair argument. I mean, you're limited by essentially what's the word I'm trying to say? You're limited by investigation structure, fundamentally. Like the way you can actually structure what you're trying to figure out is a big limit on who you can have on board,
Yeah.
what sort of information you find, how you've got to structure it. But unfortunately, it leaves a lot of the studies essentially useless as soon as you're a relatively advanced athlete. Like, if you've trained for 5 years, or not useless, I shouldn't say that. There's a lot that, like, you still know, like, what helps muscle growth, all these sort of things. But you do get to these sort of confused points where, well, you've got this evidence it works for beginners. Some people will start telling intermediates and advanced athletes they should be doing that. Then more studies come out and they try it on advanced athletes because you need to wait before it becomes a bigger thing for bigger labs, bigger just interested parties to actually then fund to have active people involved.
Then you've got to find enough athletes. The athletes, like quite a lot of the athletes, don't want to take part in research studies, right? So many of them
You've got to train for your job.
You've got to train for your job. You could be working with a strength and conditioning coach. The strength and conditioning labs are like the way forward. Like the people that are working with athletes directly and therefore get to experiment with those athletes as to how things work and what works for who. But then a lot of those athletes, because of where they are in their careers, don't really want to do things that are then going to benefit their competition. So like they'll be like, okay, right, you can do this with me, but you've got to keep it secret. You can't tell anybody until I've retired. And it's like, yeah, no, that is fair. Like, but then I've now got this thing that I know works that I can't do for anybody else for the next like 10 years. So yeah, like it's I think the thing that I do always find interesting, the argument around like whether or not something is applicable to another sample or another group, like for me comes down to like how specific the application of what you're doing is, or the application of your research is. So like when you get someone who's like, okay, right, we're going to see what number of sets is optimal for hypertrophy. And then they come out with this number of like, okay, well, 10 sets per muscle group per week is the optimal number. And it's like, for who? Like that doesn't make sense. But when you're like studying the physiological responses to a particular training stimulus, and it's like, okay, right, well, if I do this to this person and I stress them to this extent, we see this physiological adaptation. If I stress them too much, we don't see that adaptation because hormesis is a thing. If I stress them too little, we don't see that adaptation either. And then you just try and apply the same principle to a different person whose need for exposure to stress is different. So you just take the individual, you go, okay, right, this is how much you've done in the past. I want to stretch you a little bit further. So this is what we're going to do. And I'm not going to overstretch you because then we just won't see any benefit. And if you can understand, like, okay, this is the physiological adaptation this particular stimulus causes, that's going to be beneficial to this person. So how do I just impose this like stimulus on them? Like,
Yeah.
do you know what I mean? Like that works. And you can do that with beginners. You can do that with men and translate it across to women most of the time. You can do that with, it's when you start looking at like particular issues that face particular groups, or you try and do things in a way that's too applied, that things just start falling apart in terms of how the research translates into practice.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because one of the problems in medical science is that most stuff is done on like white males, which
Yeah.
causes a bit of a problem. Interestingly enough, I find with training, generally it's like, well, women respond about the same as men. You've got a lot of crossover, but where we see this problem start creeping in is actually like, what are the backgrounds? Does this person have a relatively good genetic predisposition for adapting quickly to low volume, or do they need quite a lot of stimulus? I mean, like
Yeah.
me personally, I can do heavyweight loads. You give me like a block of volume, I feel horrible. It doesn't feel nice, but I can train heavy and hard. I know I've had other clients who, like, you give them singles, they barely progress, but you chuck them 4 sets of 10, it's like it's their dream and their body feels
Yeah.
great. And it's even little fundamentals like that I feel like we end up missing out on because we almost are asking the wrong questions of the wrong groups within sports science. At least it's
Yeah,
kind of
it's
where
like
I
but it's that whole thing of like, what is the genetic difference between those individuals, and how does that impact? What is the like structural difference of like, what's the breakdown of their muscle in terms of fiber type? What's, how good are they at breaking down fats? How good are they at breaking down carbs? Like, do I need to, like, how good are they at dealing with lactate? Like, do I need to progress them slowly through this particular thing that they've not got that much tolerance for, and start trying to move in that direction? Is that even going to be beneficial, right? I could take you and you're saying, okay, right, well, I can train all day with heavyweights, but I struggle with volume. If me exposing you to more volume isn't going to be beneficial for your overall training like outcome and performance outcome, then like there's very little point in me doing it, because you're going to benefit more from me just keeping you in a block that's closer to what you specialize in based on your body type. If I have someone who's like you, but they actually want to be really, really good at like lactate threshold training, then I'm probably going to want to put them through a period where they're doing a load more volume. If they want to get good at cardio, like more volume is going to be beneficial, because they're going to need to be able to deal with repetitive strain within their like endurance sport. But like if it's someone who just wants to jump once or lift once or lift up something heavy, carry the weight of revolution on their shoulders, like
that's the dream. That's where we're gonna get.
I mean, I feel like you're getting there, man. Like
one day we'll be strong enough. If I had LeBron James
genetics,
LeBron James genetics, then I'd do it. But
he is the supreme leader.
Oh mate, he's crazy. But with these individual differences, this is something that's quite interesting, because you point out there's like you say, muscle fiber type, like genetic predispositions, but then there's also the like individual mental preferences. How good is their coordination? And all of these like weird random factors that you don't think, even just like what's their home life like, end up becoming quite important. So how do you balance the like what is quite, at least the way I describe it, is kind of like, frankly, the artistic nature of coaching, because it's always new and it's kind of off feel, but it's heavily informed by fact. Like we know that mechanical tension helps muscle growth. We know taking it through range helps. So we need to apply these principles.
Yeah.
We need to apply the idea of volume. But then
let's take it back to the mechanical to the lengthened partial situation, right? If you have someone who has rubbish range of motion, and you go, okay, right, we're going to do loads of lengthened partial works with you straight away, the amount of drop off you're going to see in all the other like potential stimuli is going to be huge, right? If you can only bend your knee to like 60 degrees off straight, then it would be 120 degrees, right? If you can only bend your knee to 120 degrees, then me trying to take you to a point where your heel is like 45 degrees away from your bum, and get you trying to do range, like get you trying to move between that range and 90 degrees, you're not going to be able to produce any force, because you don't have the capacity to get yourself into that position in the first place. Whereas if I start gradually moving you along that chain, and I go, okay, right, we're going to move to 90 degrees next, then we're going to move to 80 degrees, then we're going to move to 70, then we're going to move to 60, and try and get you all the way down to 45, and then maybe lengthen your hip to try and target your rec fem more, the progression you're going to make is going to be relatively steady. So it's just like, it's meet someone where they are and try to figure out what things they're going to benefit from and how you can start gradually moving them towards each of those directions with a training plan. So it's like, which lift are you going to target in which way? How are you going to progress it from like a progressive overload perspective? Are you going to take away rest? Are you going to lengthen it? Are you going to expose them to more intensity? Are you going to try and get them moving more quickly? Like, and then it's like, that's fundamentally it. Like, and there are genetic predispositions within people that will make them better at certain things. But if that's not the thing they want to be good at, you're going to have to find ways to expose them to the things that are going to make them better at what they want to improve on.
Yeah, I really like that, and I like the meet them where they're at, because obviously, as you say, it just depends on what they want to do a lot. But also, like, meet them where they're at means something like the lengthened partials might actually be really applicable. I mean, if you've got, say, a yogi who comes to you and they're like, I want to build some muscle, and they've never strength trained, and they've got crazy range, well, you can just instantly go like, well, we could load this end range stuff, which is going to be good for you anyway. It's going to help you build strength through range rather than passive range. And we're going to now have this net benefit of we're going to increase muscle mass. Or you might think like, I'm going to use loads that have a particularly good strength curve where it's harder in the middle. It's a little bit easier at the lengthened end, but I can still get that benefit of working high lengthened end. And that individual it makes sense for. Like your example, if you've got like a 60-year-old grandpa who wants to get stronger, but their mobility is awful. Like, of course, the goal is to improve their mobility, but you're probably better off just getting them to do normal training.
Like, I like how you went with 60-year-old grandpa when I've seen some powerlifters that are just as limited in terms of range in their 20s.
Don't like, get me started on powerlifting. There's too much to be annoyed about with powerlifting.
Oh man, I feel like we've covered quite a lot in that one. I
feel like we have. Here's what I'm going to say. What are your big three for hypertrophy? You give me three, I'll give you three, and then that way we can leave them with something to actually use alongside the lengthened partials now they've heard if they work or when they work.
What are my big three? So, I mean, realistically, mechanical tension is the key driver. So you want to try and find a way to expose yourself to more mechanical tension, and it's not mechanical tension specifically, it's mechanical overload. So like everyone talks about mechanical tension, but mechanical tension on a rep by rep basis is kind of irrelevant if you can get more volume done and as a result increase the amount of mechanical load you're exposed to, right? If you go, okay,
that's a good take.
Like that for me is like the biggest thing. It's like everyone's like, oh, I need to drive up mechanical tension. It's like, okay, right, but you're only doing 5 reps. What if you were to do 10 reps and each of those reps you had 80% of the stimulus of the 5 reps? So the 10 reps are going to be more effective. You're going to end up, you've doubled the volume, so you end up with like 60% more load just by doing that. So that's like one of the key things. Like volume is such a key element. And then taking yourself to failure, but like especially if you're working at lighter loads for higher volumes. So like if you're working at higher intensities, because of the fact that you recruit so much muscle mass with the heavier lift anyway, you don't need to worry quite so much about taking yourself to complete failure, because most of your muscle fibers are going to get stimulated. Most of your muscle fibers are going to be exposed to mechanical tension in each rep. If you're working at lighter loads where you're only recruiting, say, 30-40% of your muscle fibers per rep, all of a sudden you need to push yourself further and further into the set to really particularly target those type 2 muscle fibers. So like there's loads of research from back in the day when Dorian Yates was doing like single set training to failure, like looking at like and all the stuff around like slow controlled lifts, and I'm really intrigued to see how things are going to change in terms of how much people are going to start respecting the like super slow movement patterns that we used before. Like, because there was a load of stuff around like, okay, well, you're going to do 12-second reps, like 6 seconds up, 6 seconds down, maybe even 10 seconds up, 10 seconds down. And like everyone was like, oh, well, that's pointless because you can't really lift that much load. But now that the rep scheme that we're saying we can use is so much bigger, like people are saying like, okay, right, well, at least 30 reps, probably 50 reps, maybe 100 reps, maybe even 200 reps is still going to stimulate some kind of hypertrophy response. So if you just take it and you go, okay, well, let's think about it as work time rather than reps. If I'm doing 30 reps and I'm doing 2 seconds per rep, that's a minute of work. If I'm doing 6 seconds up, 6 seconds down for 5 reps, that's a minute of work. I'm probably going to be using similar amounts of weight. I'm probably going to be producing similar amounts of force throughout the course of the like total volume. And the mechanical stimulus is probably going to be relatively similar. So both strategies can work.
Yeah, no, they can. And I think particularly, like you say, for hypertrophy as well, because it's that overload of mechanical tension over time. And you've got such a wide range. Like, I don't think you're going to build maximal strength doing a 12-second rep, but you're bloody going to make your muscles work hard. And
Yeah.
you're probably going to get like significant growth benefit. I mean, for me, I think completely. Actually, wait, you haven't done three. I'm not going to, I want to hear the third
I
one.
feel like that was three. I said mechanical overload, uh, mechanical overload, volume is key. What was the final? What was my final one?
I guess time, sort of,
Yeah,
if you're thinking time under tension.
yeah, yeah. I'll leave it. I'll leave it at that. I'll leave it there.
I like that. I
Yeah.
like that. I've
What were your
got
three?
my three. So number one is like do isolation movements if you want something to grow because like it actually helps. But I mean that's kind of like in a way just volume. Like you
Yeah,
kind of said, it's like if you want your arms to grow and you like your plan at the moment and they haven't grown, like just do 3 sets of arms to like RPE 8 for 3 sets twice a week on biceps and triceps and you'll see a massive difference. Like it can really be that simple. Like just do a bit of isolation work. It's probably not even going to add any fatigue. You probably don't need to change anything about your plan.
yeah.
Just chuck in a bit of isolation. Obviously,
Just
if you
get
were
just
going to
you'll
do
just get a bit more arm soreness.
yeah, like obviously if you're
Yeah.
going to do isolations for calves, quads, arms, like everything, it would get a bit. But if there's just a weak point to bring up,
So like
isolation, just jump on a machine.
there's so many books on Olympic lifting as like a because strength conditioning coaches are obsessed with Olympic
Yeah,
weightlifting,
love
right?
it.
Understandably, because it's freaking awesome.
It's cool.
But like a lot of them will talk about recovery sessions, and when they talk about their recovery sessions, they talk about isolating like muscle groups because the fact what they're talking about recovering is they're talking about trying to recover their central nervous system between sessions. They don't need to worry so much about like the the metabolic like strain on a particular muscle or the mechanical strain on a particular muscle, so they can just do some light isolation work to
That's
get to
really
flush out,
fascinating.
get some extra
Makes complete
volume.
sense. Makes complete well because Olympic lifting is like a lot of people might not realize if they don't do it, but you're generally not limited by your strength.
No,
Unless you're like a really elite level lifter, you're very even some of the top ones, they're generally going to be limited by technique, speed, power, which as you say is a lot more nervous system than like if your quads are a bit sore.
yeah. So yeah, no, it's an interesting one. Yeah, you were saying about isolating. So
Right, so
that's number one.
isolations, yeah. Number two is eat more for me.
Yep.
Obviously, I know that's not particularly like a very scientific based training thing, but I find a lot of people who are like, I'm just not getting bigger. When you actually look at what they eat, it's like, just fucking eat a bit more, mate.
I mean,
Like,
that's
chuck a couple bananas into your day. Doesn't have to be anything fancy. Like you just need 300-400 calories. Like if you're not growing, you're
yeah,
not eating enough. You would either get fatter or more muscular if you're
yeah,
eating enough to build muscle. If you're getting fatter, you might be eating too much or you're not training enough
hard enough. Yeah,
hypertrophy.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, if you're not getting heavier, then you're not eating the right amount. That's that simple.
Yep, fair enough.
And
So
then
isolation and food.
yeah, and the third one, I'm gonna pick volume, but I'm gonna to kind of pair this in a little bit with metabolic stress because I find it quite hard to motivate myself to do 4 sets of 12 on an isolation thing or like on lunge. Do you know what I mean? Like I can't be
Yeah,
bothered. But what I took away from when I got like I didn't get really deep into CrossFit, but watching CrossFit, one of the things you'll see is like they are insanely jacked. And a
yep,
big part of that is they're going close-ish to failure, but not to failure. And they're just doing a disgusting amount of volume. Like if you look at a high-level CrossFitter's workout plan, even like a high-level hobbyist who just goes to your like local CrossFit gym, the volume they're putting their body through is
yep,
insane, and they get a huge amount of metabolic stress on the muscles as well. So like it's sometimes if I want my quads to grow, I'm just going to be like assault bike, step back lunges, deadlift or something to give me a little bit of respite directly to the quads. And I'm going to do that at a light enough weight for like an AMRAP until my legs feel like they're on fire. And for me, it's just like volume, metabolic stress. I see my body grow when I implement
yep.
CrossFit workouts with the goal of obviously hitting my cardiovascular system. But I actually generally will sometimes program them with the goal of just getting a stupid amount of volume in a short period
Do
of
you know
time.
what? Do you know what I think is interesting that we haven't neither of us touched on is like the importance of there being some kind of eccentric action or the importance of there being some form of muscle damage as
Yeah.
well. Because so when you take the triad, you've got mechanical tension is the primary driver, and then muscle damage and metabolic stress as augmenters of that primary driver. So if you're doing an action that is low impact, has a low eccentric load, it's less likely to lead to increases in muscle size than some. So like if you think about sled push versus squats,
Yeah.
a sled push isn't going to lead to the same degree of increases in muscle size as a squat will or a leg press will, because of the fact there's no eccentric component to it. So there's no muscle damage component to it.
Yeah.
So
And
yeah,
so useful. And this is why, actually, interesting. I think a really good example of this is if you do a box jump, you could do loads of box jumps. Chances are your legs aren't going to hurt that bad. Do loads of depth drops,
yeah,
and you're going to feel your legs.
yeah. I did rebound jumps for the first time in absolutely ages, like last week, and yeah,
Yeah.
I can vouch for that statement.
Yeah, it's that disgusting stretch, but it's actually really important to mention. I'm glad you brought it up before we finish, because that eccentric is, I mean, like you say, it's really useful for like muscle damage, and like it makes the body actually grow. Like you say, it modulates the stimulus you're getting alongside metabolic stress. But also, it's quite important to think like, well, you can actually grow muscle doing things like rebound box jumps, even though it's a short range, because you've got this stretch and it modulates it. Well, then it's like, well, okay, is the mechanical tension you're getting from this shorter range being modulated enough to
Yeah,
then overcome what maybe you could do over the same range without the eccentric? And this is where, once again, you get into this murky waters of like, what's actually the right decision, what's not. And you have to just, I mean, like you said, meet people where they're at, pick based on the individual. And actually, we're going to do a fourth bonus
based on the
one.
sum of all the goals as well, right? So like
Yeah.
you could have someone who really just wants to get bigger, in which case more isolation exercises, making sure you're sitting in the right sort of rep range, making sure that you're like probably targeting the lengthened position slightly more than you would with a high level athlete. That's fine. But if you've got someone who wants to get a bit bigger but also wants to become more explosive, also wants to like get stronger,
Feel
you
good
probably
day
need
to day.
yeah, but you probably need to think about, okay, well, how do I target those others? How do I target explosivity? How do I target maximum strength? And how do I bring that all together in a way that's going to promote more muscle mass development as well?
Yeah.
But yeah, you
Yeah.
were going to say
And it
something.
gets tricky
I
there.
cut you off.
No, that's right. I was just going to say fourth bonus one, actually. I think similar with that, it's like sometimes you just got to try shit and see if it works.
Yeah,
Like you can come up with the best ideas in the world, and you can think this through, and you give it to someone, and it just doesn't do what you think it's going to do. And that might be for any number of reasons outside of your control. And then you go, well, okay, let's pick one thing, change it in and out, see what happens. And it might
yeah,
be that thing. If it isn't, well, then you can go, well, if we like this thing, we can keep it in. Let's try something else. And you just have to fucking sometimes throw shit at a wall till it sticks with training, I think. And hypertrophy is kind of one of those. I think there's a million different things where it will be like, this is like promoting hypertrophy and it doesn't work, or it does work and it shouldn't work. Like I've
I think
seen
it's the
people
whole thing
get
of
bigger
understanding.
whilst doing marathon training, and it's like it shouldn't, but it does.
But it's like the people that say you can't get bigger doing Bosu squats. It's like, well, if the person's not done any kind of squat movement before, a Bosu squat's still going to make them bigger because it's still
Yeah,
going to be
legs
more
are going to
mechanical
grow.
tension. I think it's just like, yeah, it's the more knowledge you have about the different things that can create and can stimulate hypertrophy, the better. But then it's just understanding the jigsaw of how you piece those things together and how some of those are actually providing the same stimulus. So like if you're doing a load of like active stretching, you probably don't need to do lengthened partials
Yeah,
because you're already getting something that's stimulating sarcomerogenesis. So you can focus the majority of your strength training on like actual
interesting.
like
Yeah,
mid-range, full range actions. If you're not doing that, then you potentially will benefit from, and it's the whole mentality around kind of biohacking. Like everyone kind of talks about these biohacks and trying to find hacks and trying to find, and it's like find the thing that you struggle with. If you are genuinely thinking about trying to impose something small and make a really small thing that then impose something like really small in a way that's going to lead to a big change, do the thing that you don't do and you really struggle with,
yeah.
because that's going to be the thing that causes the biggest amount of stress with a low dose, and as a
Yeah.
result leads to the biggest improvement with that low dose. But yeah, anyway, that's bonus
I
number 5.
I like that. I like the bonus. I completely agree. Like going for the weak points, and I think what we can kind of conclusively say is like lengthened partials in a way do work. Should everyone be prioritizing them, or should they be getting promoted as like the new hypertrophy? This is going to change your life. Probably not.
No, definitely not.
Like they're good for hypertrophy. They're probably no better than any of the other things you can do to help your hypertrophy. If it makes sense to implement them, do it. If it doesn't, get gone.
If you haven't done them for a while, try them. That's it. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, good.
Sounds
Awesome.
good to me. Nice. Great chat.
Great to chat
We
to you,
will
man.
catch you the next time we do this.
Take care, team. Bye bye.
Goodbye.